So we're just going to go ahead and get this started, right? So super excited to be here. My name is Brittany Istenes. I am the Open Source Program Office Strategist at Fannie Mae. Interesting, regulated industry with a open source program office and then somebody that they hired like me. So that is very fantastic. So today is a really special panel. I'm really excited about this because we're going to be talking about InnerSource. We're going to get deep dive into InnerSource, and in a little bit we're going to talk about the definition of InnerSource. But what's really cool today is, first and foremost, we have an all-woman panel, which is amazing. Round of applause, absolutely. This is absolutely fantastic. But what's even more interesting is that there are 4 different perspectives on InnerSource here today. And so you're going to be learning the different perspectives from somebody that's just starting off their InnerSource program, someone that has established an InnerSource program as a third party within another organization, as well as someone that is a huge member, I'm not going to spoil the thunder, but also independent. And then there's me. I work in an OSPO, right? So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off, and we're going to just start with a nice round of introductions with our fabulous panelists. We'll just go down the line.
Okay. Hi, I'm Addie Girouard. I work with Third Man Agency. We are a strategic communications consultancy, and I help organizations get the value proposition of InnerSource and open source throughout their organization and outside of their organization. I am a bridge between teams and executives and anybody who doesn't understand the value of it. So I craft narratives around that.
Hello, I'm Cara Delia. I work in Red Hat's OSPO. I'm a community architect, and I do everything from our upstream AI, our emerging trends, and including InnerSource. And so if you're not familiar with Red Hat, A, go by the booth and get a hat. But B, we are the oldest enterprise open source organization, and within that, you think open source and how does that equal to InnerSource. One of the things that we do at Red Hat is to focus InnerSource objectives to lead to being able to be comfortable around open source, or the path to open source, especially in regulated industries like financial services.
Hello, I'm Mimi Flynn. I am the open source developer advocate for Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley is a big bank, and you all know that. We have a lot of software engineers at Morgan Stanley and across many different divisions, and I'm really excited to be here to talk about our journey.
That's awesome. No, this is really, really, really fun. So we're just going to get right into it because we have limited time, and I know that we could talk about this for a while. So something that I mentioned at the beginning is that InnerSource has many definitions, right? Many times you might be leveraging InnerSource as what I think applying open source principles inside of your company's firewall. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. And so what I'd like to hear from all of you is, what does InnerSource mean? What is the definition? And do you feel as though there should be a unified definition of InnerSource within our industry?
Whoa, totally. Well, I have the microphone, so I'm going to answer first. I see InnerSource as an opportunity to collaborate across different divisions. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of us at Morgan Stanley writing duplicate code all over the place because we just don't know that anybody else is working on the exact same thing. And creating a space where we can all work on that together and identify common solutions to common problems is key.
No, you're fine. To echo onto that, I would definitely say the collaborative piece. Come on in. We're not... So the collaborative piece and being able to make sure, also it's going to help to create more of a secure environment, because with that duplication, there could be dedupes of data sources. So, if there is a library that has been, has any kind of malicious actors in it, and if there's one part of the business that is aware of this and the other part of the business isn't aware of this, then, you're going to have security issues and risks associated with that. I think in addition, though, with InnerSource, going back to what I was saying, is that it does help to create that culture of being able to contribute back to a community, whether it be an external community like a FINOS or internal into your own communities of practice within your organizations.
Well, I think that they covered it, but I will say that obviously I think that InnerSource is a unique opportunity for organizations to really harness the power inside their organization at a much greater level, because it's about the people. It's about building the people together and bringing them together, and you have an opportunity to review code more often and have more visibility. You bring people, we're talking about collaboration, you bring people not only together, but you enhance and empower their ability to grow their own career and their ability to take on new challenges and move and have better agency throughout your organization in order to respond to threats that happen. I know, we all face sometimes threats that are seriously problematic, and one of the biggest things that I think leadership gets when they implement an InnerSource program is you have engineers with agency and the capacity to jump in and make a difference immediately. Your response time is like that. They are coming. They know how to it. They're familiar with your code base, and they can move to it with such speed, the speed that business demands.
I wholeheartedly agree with all three of your definitions. But hearing how varied that they all are, I think that as we are sitting here thinking and listening to these subject matter experts, how can we unify this message to hone it in for it to all make sense within our industries too, right? Because you're targeting, each one of you are targeting specific challenges, which we're going to address soon, that we need to overcome in order to adopt these sets of very strong practices that we actually do know work. So my next question would be just that, challenges and opportunities. From each of your perspectives, what has been one challenge in this time that you've spent navigating these InnerSource waters? And I don't like to say like the challenge happened, but what opportunity came from that challenge that you could share with everyone to kind of flip that narrative, to show to not give up, and what Kelsey Hightower said today, finish something.
I can speak to that. So at Red Hat, we worked with Lloyds Banking, a very established institution in the UK. And one of the things that we were doing with their OSPO is that we created these communities of practice, so leveraging gamification to be able to engage their developers, because they were very siloed. And so across the organization, and this was still within, we did a test bed, so it wasn't enterprise to start with, but it is rolled out as enterprise now. So one of the things that we did was we looked at each, the two teams that we were going to have working together. Where were there opportunities for them to collaborate? Because InnerSource at its heart is change management, and so it allows innovation, the million-dollar word, digital transformation. But it's worth having both of the teams look at how they basically creating SLAs with one another, because the question was always rising as to, and the concern was, who owns this risk? If we're maintaining this library and this other team comes in and they're contributing code, not just consuming code, how do we know that it's safe? And so it's creating SLAs with one another, and also creating areas of innovation is what we called it, and it's essentially a sandbox environment before it would go deploy into production.
SLAs, I love that, because we're on a journey. We're at the very beginning of our journey at Morgan Stanley, to be totally honest. We have some InnerSource projects internally, but it's hard to find them. Like I said earlier, there's so many of us. It's 20,000 engineers, I believe, that it's just really difficult to organize, get people focused away from their business cases into something else. It's really difficult to know how to get people engaged and how to justify that time. And overall, like when you're talking service level agreement, yeah, that's incredible, because that formalizes the relationship ultimately. And I think that that could really help in our space, to tell you the truth. And I think that I want to consider that some more. I know that last year, yeah, totally. Like last year, you and Brittany talked about, was it working group and
special interest groups.
Yeah.
Avoiding that learned helplessness of, I don't know the answer, let me file a ticket.
Yeah, and hands off, all of a sudden, somebody else's responsibility when engineers can be empowered to fix these problems themselves and to understand what's going on, understand the direction of the project. And so I've been starting this journey through a listening tour, getting to understand the cultures internally and trying to gauge what you had 2 teams that were essentially a case study. Like identifying teams that would be a good case study and to see what people are already doing and what works within our company culture.
And really quick too, I think a great opportunity to come out of that is SLA's level setting, but when you're going through your quarterly planning, find these teams and identify them as your dependencies. Yeah. Identify, okay, so we are harnessing this tool, so find them as a dependency and then factor the work into their current upcoming quarter. And you can rely on each other because you have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it might need to be yearly, but you know what I mean.
Well,
we'll see how it goes.
So quickly, the challenges that I see come out often are around communications and around the value. What is the business value this is bringing to my company? So a lot of times, your InnerSource program is sort of a grassroots effort. You have some developers who love it, they're into it, they're pushing it, and they cannot get traction up and out and throughout the organization. And that's where I typically will come in and help them position and get the sponsorship that they need and convey that. And what is really cool working with these organizations is seeing the difference that it makes, because it really doesn't take long to get the value. It's just finding how it connects to your business's proposition, right? Because everyone is unique and there is an answer for each and every one of them. It just takes a little bit of time, and I love seeing the difference that it makes, because you get empowered engineers out of it, and that makes all the difference in the world.
So let's add on to that cultural impact before we get into the dreaded concept of data governance. So the cultural impact, right? So we're determining InnerSource, communications, community, it really works. So what could you determine would be one of the biggest benefits of having full-scale InnerSource adoption within your enterprise? What does that idealistic future look like, but phrase it in a way that is realistic, because we know it is a bank?
Well, I touched on it earlier. So again, going back to empowered engineers, right? You guys have business risks, and this empowers you, and it empowers you to be able to act faster when issues come up. It empowers you to be able to work together much quicker because you've laid the groundwork. You've worked through it. You know, you're familiar. This is not a new concept. You're not in a box where you own your space, but you're not familiar with anything else. And so it gives you the agency to move about and to advance in such a way that I think is just, it's the ideal, right? You have an organization filled with people who have the agency to be able to act, the knowledge to be able to act, and the support to be able to act in the way that they can and that they want to, right? There's not a limit. And I think when we see organizations embrace that overall, we're going to be looking at a much better world in financial.
Yeah, that's a nice touch about support. Thank you for saying that.
So when I give this perspective, this is Kara being part of OSR and FINOS as a community member, not necessarily Red Hat. And that is that I don't think everything can be InnerSourced, but I think it's identifying the strategic elements that can, across the board, across your enterprise, be kind of that change management that you were talking about to empower, but really creating the unified libraries or areas that it is just table stakes for your organization. It's not necessarily bespoke parts of your business, but it's an area, just going across from a universal standpoint. And I think that's kind of goes back to your point around the standards, and especially being able to, the benefit being able to be more agile in dealing with regulatory requirements and not compromising the work that you're having to do in the process thereof.
Really quickly, so you touched on a standard. I'm throwing you this one because I'm curious about standards, because we do need to have standards and procedures within regulated industries. Do you feel as though having an InnerSource standard that we would have to adhere to would be beneficial? Do you think that that should set the tone for development best practices?
I don't think in the beginning,
Okay.
because we want people to adhere to it in InnerSource, and I think that would be, if we're making people to do, or there'd be no way to really make people do InnerSource. It could be something similar like the Common Cloud Controls project that is within FINOS, but I think from the beginning, I would not say that it needs to be. It does need to be standardized eventually, but I wouldn't say from the outgo.
Yeah, I like that. So don't force people to do it. So then from a cultural impact, what would you think of that within InnerSource?
Not making people do it. That's interesting because I kind of want to make some people do it. My goal is to make people do it. Not really. I don't actually have a goal like that. But I feel like in regards to the working group situation, I've been socializing this idea that if you use a piece of software internally, that you should contribute to it, that you should really consider a level of ownership in it, and should be potentially required to take on a ticket and make some changes. Just get your feet wet, see what's going on, get to know that team better, and to understand the greater context of the libraries and like software that you're using that's being created internally. So I can't really speak to them because I think that it should be required. And I consider the newest employees. Like, let's say that there's people that have graduated from college that join your institution, and they have just been working on the same piece of legacy software for a very long time. And to bring them out of that space and into a collaborative InnerSource project where they can understand a broader scope of the work that they do can be really life-changing. It can help them hone their craft in a way, and think about the work that they do and the work that others have done in a different perspective. So I find that to be a stepping stone into potentially like internal mobility, learning a new language, or just having further understanding of infrastructure that they've never considered working on.
Well, that was amazing, because that is like the essential reason why we get into open source as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. So building upon that idea, then scaling and sustainability, right? We've talked about some challenges that we faced. We've talked about cultural impact, the definitions of open source, or InnerSource, pardon me. Now that we are going through all of these processes in our current working lives, how would we scale and how do we sustain it? That would be a really good question.
I would love to know the answer to that question because we're at the very beginning of our journey. But you mentioned that you started off with 2 teams, and then how did you scale that? Like proof of here, I'll give you the microphone.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but so one of the things is basically wrapping it up as a case study and showing that this is what two parts of the business have done, helping to really, going back to what you're saying, is share that value and show how those teams are able to work together, that it is not as scary as you would think, especially from a risk perspective. There was something. Say the question again, because you said something that got my brain just fizzled.
So Howard, it's okay. Scaling and sustainability, right? So now that we're scaling, how do we make it sustainable? How do we make it last?
The last part. Okay, so the other pieces that we haven't really talked about is really getting the leadership engagement. And I think one of the things that I had mentioned in talking about with Lloyd's was the work with the OSPO. That's you. But so having the OSPO be able to navigate those conversations and really broker those in the beginning, and to have them be the ones that are creating the path forward. And then from that, you're going to get, and this is kind of into the scalability as well, is getting internal advocates or evangelists, should we say, from a grassroots effort. And that's another reason why I don't think it needs to be standardized in the beginning, so that you can get that groundswell from an organic standpoint. So really you can see the innovations that can happen and the possibilities. Really, it's the art of the possibility without having to put too many restrictions around it from the get-go. And I'll let you talk too. Sorry.
You're on a roll. You could keep going.
Great.
I mean, obviously, leadership is going to be the most critical piece. You need a sponsor that's visible and present and active and talking about the importance of this effort to the business. Why is InnerSource important? You want your C-suite representative front and center to explain why this is important, because without them, you're going to be dead in the water. You will not scale, you won't expand, like it's not going to be sustainable. So you have to have that buy-in, and after that, once you have an active sponsor, it becomes imperative that you have the supports necessary to equip the people managers to guide their team to adopt that methodology, which is, for the record, a process. It takes time. It's not going to be click your heels and everybody is onboarded. It's one department head at a time. It's one team at a time. When I've scaled up, spent a lot of time, you start with 2 teams, you get them to practice some InnerSource, and then you have them go work with someone else, and you capture feedback, qualitative, quantitative data, and you showcase it everywhere you can throughout your organization. You go and you speak. You're on a speaking tour. Here's what it is. It's always really powerful if you can find someone who is so against InnerSource. I remember the first one that I did, we had a gentleman who was a staunch open source advocate, and the idea that I would bring InnerSource to him or the organization was a horrible thing. And it was actually a lovely experience because I got to explain and showcase, and he became the biggest advocate for why it made a difference, and it made a difference for his team there. And so it takes time. Equipping the people managers is going to be critical once you've locked in your sponsorship.
Thank you. All 3 of you, that was just very, very, very insightful. So as we're going to be wrapping this up, I want to kind of lean into our lessons learned and best practices from all 3 different perspectives. Or actually, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to put in a 4th one. One of the biggest lessons learned that I could probably take away from our InnerSource journey is, I don't know if y'all could tell, I kind of have a big personality. So I just went for it. I was like, oh, that's a good project, let's InnerSource it. Oh, that's a great project, let's InnerSource it. I did all of it, and all of a sudden now I have 15 projects under my belt, 1 solo community manager. Okay, great, the projects, their documentation is ready. How can I scale it? What are the measurements? Not being able to define my measurements or my metrics. That was one of the biggest mistakes that I could have done. And so now we have a really refined practice, but I'm still playing catch up because of metrics. So that is one takeaway that I will say of a lesson learned on my part. So start with the 2 teams. Start with 2, don't do 15. And that's my lesson learned. So I'll just pass that on down.
So one of the lessons also, in addition to that, would be, or building on that, is identifying who your stakeholders are. So it's the teams, but it's the teams are the stakeholders, but then there's also, you're going to want to talk to legal and compliance. And, is this going to be something that you would want in a training and development? So do you incorporate HR? I mean, it really depends on your strategic goals. And I would say from the beginning, you're going to want to map out what are your goals as to what you're trying to achieve, because then that way you can be able to build those healthy metrics and potentially see any gotchas, prior to building this out.
I'm just taking notes. So metrics, 2 teams,
Yeah.
legal and compliance? Stakeholders. Right. And then potentially HR and legal and compliance.
Yeah.
All right, got it.
Incentivization. Think incentivization,
Right,
and
'cause you-
what
gamification.
Kara mentioned, gamification.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say communicate. Communicate often. Communicate. Tell people. Equip your people to be able to talk about it and feel successful talking about what they've done and the impact that they've had. And if you can't, find someone in the organization to partner with to equip them. There are plenty of creatives out there who would love to make something that looks slick and give them the words to be able to present that and explain that. If people are successful doing it, they're going to talk more about it, and it's going to grow legs of its own. So partner and communicate.
Communicate. Yeah, absolutely. InnerSource Commons, FINOS, SIG, InnerSource SIG, we're all there. So if you want to find us, You can. And I broke this thing for the 5th time. So let's just do a quick round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much. That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. I love that. We actually have time for a couple questions. So we have time for legitimately 2. We have 5 minutes.
The question I had when you were all talking about...
So they can hear it on camera. Here you go.
When you were all talking about standards and not feeling comfortable about standards, like imposing those, what was going through my mind was maturity, because I'm thinking of open source foundations and organizations that have an incubator model to say, well, okay, you're this mature, but here's what you would need to do. So I wanted your opinion on having at least a conventional way of looking at maturity of an InnerSource project, because that can help them figure out, you're not doing these practices yet, maybe we need to work on continuity of ownership, continuity of leadership, and so I'm curious about your thoughts on that dimension.
There's actually a InnerSource maturity model that's in the InnerSource Commons Foundation that you can look up, pattern. And I encourage you to utilize that, because there's been some great work done on the ISPO working group in trying to identify that. And as far as yeah.
I would say also thinking about the dependencies. So how is this going to impact the rest of the organization? Is this a really high-level project, or is this something that would be more low-level, just unique to your team? If you feel like it could be something that would find value across multiple teams or parts of the organization, that would be something to consider. I think as well, you would want, based on the topic, is there someone, if you're not already partnering with them, is there someone that you can be able to sell this into to be able to partner with you?
Awesome. All right, got time for one more? Or, okay. This is, all right, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for attending. We almost had a full room. Amazing. I know.